I'm Susan LeBlanc, and this is Conversations with the Goodman School of Business. My guest today is Bob Lytle from Related.to. Welcome, Bob.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks for coming by. Related.to is an interesting company, which I think I'm going to let you explain because obviously it's your company, so you're going to know better than I do what it's all about. So what is Related.to all about?
So we are what's known as a predictive analytics company. Mm-hmm. We specialize in using open data, which is data that's been delivered by government agencies to the market to help companies make predictions, typically on commercial enterprises. So what will this company do? How will this company perform in the market? So we gather all of that data from a variety of sources. We merge it with some interesting technology that actually had its start at Google and Facebook. Mm-hmm. So you think of data being linked to other data similar to how friends are linked to other friends. So the goal for us is to paint a very complete picture of companies and of business owners, and then we apply a series of big data technologies to that and analytics technologies to that to develop scores and models to predict what's going to happen in the market. For instance, we might help a bank predict what's going to happen in a particular line or industry of business, and is this trending upwards or downwards? And then how does that impact the portfolio of companies that they work with? So we'll work primarily with banks and insurance companies, also with governments, especially in the area here in Niagara, looking at the projections for business in a certain sector, maybe manufacturing, maybe transportation, and then how the individual companies will fare over time. Businesses use that to obviously forecast what's going to happen and change interest rates or do things that might help build a market.
Yeah, so it's big data.
Yeah, it's big data.
Big, and as we've said a few times on this little program, big data is big right now. I mean, it's everywhere. It affects everything, and so you're sort of on the starting out, like leading edge of this sort of thing.
It's very interesting. Yeah. I spent a significant amount of my time in the corporate world at the credit bureau, and if you look at what a credit bureau does, it gathers data primarily from banks and other providers, but it's largely closed and proprietary. Big data is really based on what the internet is based on, which is as much information as you can imagine, anything from sensors to every government agency. What you find is that with that much information, the computers need to be faster and faster and better in order to process them. We've now hit a key time in the market where you have more data than you could ever use, and you have significant processing power that allows smart folks, trained folks, to come together, bring that data and that technology together to come up with findings, models, and scores that just frankly weren't possible even 5 or 10 years ago.
Wow. It's amazing how quickly it's changing everything.
Right.
But we have another reason for having you here, and that's because you have quite a link to Brock University and the Goodman School of Business, and I had the pleasure of being at one of your events just last week that you did with some student interns, and that was called Educated, right?
The Educated program,
Educated
yes.
program.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that, because it was really an interesting morning that I spent with you.
So for me, as a former teacher, it's always been very interesting to bring in younger folks, students. I am a transplant from the U.S. In Canada, especially in Ontario, we have a very, very rich concept of co-op that, frankly, is stronger than any place that I've ever seen before. So the idea that you can bring in folks who are in the midst of their school career, maybe just have finished, and come in and make a dramatic impact on a company impressed itself upon me in my corporate life. So now coming to a startup, where am I going to go? Well, first of all, we locate near Brock because of the quality of the education and some of the things we'll talk about, the business analytics program here. So I knew from day one that we wanted to make co-op part of our staffing strategy. So we have folks from various backgrounds, but we always value bringing in co-ops to educate them in what the world is like. So we brought in a couple of younger folks, undergrad co-ops, and started toying with the idea, well, why do you have to wait until university to learn big data? Why not teach it to high schoolers? And so actually this program, the Educated program, was conceived by our undergrad co-ops to say we can teach high school students, or in our case even grade school students, how to use some of the big data technologies that are out there. And they were successful over a 5-week period. In running 3 days a week. They ran a boot camp in doing data acquisition, data cleaning, research, some pretty interesting predictive analytics, and then used visualization technology. So after that period of time, they were able to then present the event you went to, which to the public, and a lot of Brock professors came. Very happy to have representation from the government, from the local business community. And frankly, looking at an 8th grader talk about the correlation coefficient of the Olympic swimmers,
it was amazing.
You couldn't ask for more.
It was really interesting because, as you said, there was the one young man was just going into grade 8, I believe, and you had some presenting who were in 2nd year of university, and you also had participants from locally here and from Chicago, which was really interesting to sort of hear and to hear those, and the one actually came and was here present to. Now, was that student here the whole time for all 5 weeks?
No, we did the program both locally and then also simulcast. We used web conferencing, so that student came up for the final presentation.
Isn't that nice?
It
with his family.
was great with his family. I mean, it's kind of an exciting time for them.
It was nice to see young people spending a good chunk of their summer delving into this area, and they were really passionate about it and really interested in it. It was really, and they got to pick topics that were of interest to them. Right.
So we had one do, several of them did work around social impact issues, whether it was crime or poverty. Mentioned the student that did the sports,
Yes.
So what's very interesting with all of those students across the board, we also had pretty high variance in maybe what they would call their mathiness. That was what our co-ops called it. And some loved it, and some said, well, I really am not into that. Our goal for the program was to see if you could use big data to overcome maybe a fear of math or a fear of calculation by showing that the tools can lead you to a very interesting analytic result. I was proud both of the students themselves, but also, frankly, of our staff who put together the program. I think it was transformative for all. And for me, that is just as important as a commercial deal, is be able to do some good in the area and really project what can happen if we spend a little bit of time, apply the technology in a new way with our youth.
So, and you talked a little bit about the co-op that you had. You had a young lady working with you, and you also have some MBA graduates working with you. So, you really are a great supporter of Brock and the Goodman School of Business, for sure.
Well, I think Goodman is turning out some incredibly high-skilled, high-quality candidates, and not just with the technical aspect of looking at the tools, and that's very important. You need to know how to use SAS or whatever you use. But really thinking about the story behind the numbers becomes increasingly important. So yes, we did hire, our first hire was a recent MBA from the Goodman Analytics program, and we've since hired another one. I want to highlight, though, we've also hired a recent PhD from the Humanities Department because it's important for us not just to be technically and algorithmically sound, but also talk about the contextual or the emotional impact of what the data means. Data is about stories. If it's just about numbers, it will go over the head or around the side of so many people. So we really believe in maybe a more holistic approach to the numbers.
That's wonderful. That's great. We also want to mention a little bit Professor Anthony So I know you've been working with him on the Business Analytics Center.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so I was excited to hear that the Center of Business Analytics finally was approved earlier this summer. I started talking with Dr. Ianso when we first were contemplating the company because I wanted to know if we had the base here in Niagara to really rely on for staffing. And he was able to convince me pretty handily that we have some incredibly eager, what I'll call curious minds. I'm a big believer that you can teach technical skills, but if you're not invigorated by the concept of exploring or investigating, you really don't have much. Dr. Ianso spends his time in his coursework and guiding his students through the concept of why does it matter, what does it mean, how will you apply this in the real world. So there are many places you can go to understand research on analytics. There are maybe fewer places where you can go and actually have that become incredibly practical. Brock's mission is about service learning, being practical, get out in the workforce, understand the world as it exists. The Center for Business Analytics is a huge part of that, and frankly, we're proud to be part of maybe the initial wave of that, but expect that there will be some very, very solid corporate sponsors that come on board to support Dr. Ianso's mission, and we're delighted to be part of that as well.
That's great. That's great. Well, we've run out of time, but if you have just quickly any advice you'd give for any students interested in getting involved with analytics?
Well, I think especially for the Goodman students, one of the things, and every time we put out job recs, and we do that, now we're in our third round of hiring at Brock, we get many, many, many results. What I look for is the meaning in the story. So the technical hard skills are very, very important. You cannot teach passion, context, in understanding of your impact on the world around you. So as a business student, you are coming in maybe the ultimately practical degree area where you are thinking about how to improve and drive commerce. And because of that, you need to present yourself as being of the world and understand that how your technical learning can have a definite impact. I will tell you again, Brock is maybe uniquely positioned because of its focus on being out in the community and being in service learning, that really comes full bear into fruit.
That's great. Well, Bob, thank you so much for coming by. This has been really interesting, and thank you for inviting me to the presentations last week. It was really interesting to see that. And thank you for tuning in, and hopefully we will talk soon.